Welcome to this YSL Report Builder tutorial. In this part of the series, we're going to look at trimming and replacing text values. So the video is all about cleaning up untidy text that you might have imported into a report. We'll start by looking at how to trim leading and trailing spaces from a string of text, and we'll look at how to do that in both SQL and in Visual Basic. Then we'll move on and look at how you can replace characters in a string, including how to deal with case sensitivity, so making things either case sensitive or non-case sensitive. The final part of the video looks at how to replace quote or delimiter characters, which is a little more fiddly than it should be, but we'll give you a few techniques you can use to get that to work. So not a particularly long video, but let's get started. I've started a brand new blank report in Report Builder, and as usual, the first thing I'm going to do is create a connection to the movies database. Another reminder, if you don't already have it installed, you can follow along with this video which explains exactly how to get it set up, and there's a link in that video's description which you can use to download the files you'll need. Back to Report Builder then, and assuming you already have the movies database, I'm going to right click on the data sources folder and choose Add Data Source. I'll call the data source movies as usual, and then choose to use an embedded connection pointing to a Microsoft SQL server, and click the build button to help construct the connection string. The server name is on my local machine, so I'll type in a shortcut to the localhost // followed by the instance name SQL 2017. I can then select my movies database from the drop-down list further down the dialog box, and when I've done that I can click OK a couple of times, and there's my data source. Now I'd like to create a dataset which uses it, so I'm going to right click on the data source called movies, click Add Dataset, and I'll call this dataset Movie Roles. I'll use the query designer so that I don't have to write out my select statement, and from the tables folder I'm going to select one column from each of three different tables. From the actor table first I'll select full name, and then from the film table I'll select title, and then finally from the role table I'll select role. Having done that I can click OK, and then I can click OK again, and there's my data set created. Finally, for this little bit of setup, I want to create a table which displays those results. So I'm going to tidy up my report by deleting the title text box and then remove my page footer. Right click into the report body and choose Insert Table, and then I'll assign the three fields in this order. I'll go for the role first, and then the full name of the actor, and then the title of the film. Just to make sure that all my text actually gets displayed when I run the report, so you may be aware of the font rendering bug where sometimes the text doesn't really appear properly. I'm going to switch the default font of the table for all the cells to a different font, and then back to the default font, and that'll ensure that everything appears as normal. I can then do some basic formatting for the column headers. This is to your preference, of course, and then I'll change the widths of some of those columns just to make things look a little more readable when we run the report, and then we should see a list of the roles, actors and films in which those actors played that part. So there's the basic part set up. The next thing I'd like to do is sort this table alphabetically by the name of the role that the actor played. So to do that I can click into any cell in the table and then right click on any of the grey boxes around the left or the top of the table and choose to view Tablix properties. In the dialog box that appears I can head over to the sorting page and then choose to add a sort by role in A to Z or ascending order, and when I click OK and run the report, while the order of the results has indeed changed, it's not quite as expected. Clearly these first few items here aren't actually alphabetically listed when compared to all of the other items in the list. And the reason for that is rubbish data, basically. Somebody's made a mistake. I wonder who that could have been. When entering these values, or when copy pasting them more likely, they've left a leading space in front of the name of the character. So there's a space. It's difficult to see, of course, and virtually impossible to make out when you're just looking at the report, but the leading space there is messing up the sort order of the information in this table. So what I'd like to do is get rid of any leading spaces that are messing up this sort order. Unfortunately, there's a simple function we can use to do that. If we switch back to the design view, I'm going to create a new calculated field in my movie roles dataset. I'll right click on it and then choose Add Calculated Field. And I'm going to call this one trimmed roll. And that gives you a clue as to the name of the function we're about to use. If we then click FX at the right hand side of that to launch the expression builder, I'm going to jump into the common functions category and into the text category to find a range of 3 different functions that allow you to trim spaces from the beginning or the end of a string. So there's one called L-trim, which takes spaces away from the left-hand side of the string. So we could legitimately use that one, and that will get rid of the leading space in front of the character's name. There's one called R-trim, which isn't particularly useful to us right now, but that will take away spaces at the right-hand side of the string. And there's one called just trim, and that gets rid of both leading and trailing spaces. So we can use either trim or L-trim here. I'm going to use trim. I'm going to double click on that to insert the function name and open up the round brackets. And then from my fields list, I can insert the roll field. I can then just close the round brackets and the final expression looks like so. And having done that, I can click OK and OK again. Rather than displaying the trimmed roll, or I can display the trimmed roll, I suppose, let's switch the roll to the trimmed roll. Just displaying it doesn't make any difference to the order of the results, but you might be able to make out the slight difference in the way the text is displayed there. There's no space in front of the character name now. But if we wanted to get this sorted, of course, then we need to change the order by for the table. So back into the design view, click into a cell in the table and then right click on one of the grey boxes around the outside and choose TableX properties. Head back to the sorting page, and then from the drop down list we can choose to sort by trimmed roll instead. If we then click OK and then run the report, we'll see now we've solved the first 4 rows where there were previously leading spaces messing up the sort order, have now all been moved into the appropriate place alphabetically in the list. It's worth knowing that we also have trim functions available in SQL. So if I head back to the design view and I wanted to recreate that column in the underlying select statement, I can right click on the movie roles dataset and choose dataset properties. I'll add a new column by typing in a new line above my from clause, followed by a couple of spaces and a comma. And then depending on exactly which version of SQL Server you're working with, this determines which functions you have available. There is a trim function, just like the one we've just used in Visual Basic, but that was only added to SQL Server from SQL Server 2017. If you're working in an earlier version of SQL Server, then you're stuck with the L-trim and R-trim functions. If you wanted to do a full trim, then the standard approach was to do a left trim followed by a right trim in the same expression. So let's just have a quick look at how that works. I'm going to do an L trim, open some round brackets, of an R trim of the roll column. So I'm just going to copy and paste that rather than type it all in. I'll then need to close 2 sets of round brackets and I'll assign an alias to that. I'll say as trimmed roll 2 for lack of an inventive name. There we go. So an R trim nested inside an L trim. Having done that, if I were to click OK, and then I'm just going to modify the sort order of my table again, just to prove that it still works in the same way. So back into TableX properties, I'll sort by trimmed roll 2 and then click OK, and then run the report. And we'll see the sort order is exactly the same as with the Visual Basic version of that trim function. Now there's one other thing affecting the sort order of our characters, and those are the characters whose names don't begin with a letter but with a punctuation character instead, a double quote in this case. You can see that the double quote is sorted above any number or letter character. So what I'd like to do is replace the double quotes in the name so that these things are sorted alphabetically. But just to explain how the replace function works, we're going to start by trying to replace the letter A in the character names, just to give you a bit of background about how the replace function works. Back in the design view, I'm going to add a new calculated field to my movie roles dataset, and I'm going to call this one replace A. I'll hit the FX button on the right hand side, and then I will go to my common functions text category, scroll down and find the replace function. I can give that a quick double click, And then there are three things that I need to fill in at a basic level. I need to fill in a reference to the field containing all the text, so that's the role column, so I can go to the fields list and double click the role field, followed by a comma, and then I need to say which character it is I'm trying to replace. So in some double quotes, I'll type in the letter A and close the double quotes, followed by another comma, and then I need to say what letter or what characters I want to replace the A or other string with. So in this case, I'd like to replace the single letter A with nothing, an empty string. So I can type in two double quotes together and then close the round brackets. It's true to say that I can replace more than just a single character at a time. I could type in an entire word there. So I could find, I don't know, the word Bill and replace it with William or vice versa. But in this case, we're just going to go with a single letter. Once I've done that, I'm going to click OK and OK again. And then I'm going to drag this replace A field into the table just next door to the role column. And I'll just change the width of that column as well so we can read it a little more clearly. And when I run the report, I'll see that all the lowercase a's in the character's name have indeed been replaced. But the uppercase A that starts the first character's name is still there. So there's a quick little hint here that the replace function by default is case sensitive. Let's have a quick look at how we can change that to be case insensitive. So it will replace all the letter A's regardless of whether they're uppercase or lowercase. Back to the design view, and I'm going to right click on my replace A function or field and then choose field properties. I'll click the FX button at the right hand side to get back to the expression builder. And then I'm going to specify a few extra optional parameters. It isn't immediately apparent that these extra parameters exist in the common functions category, text, if I just select the replace function. The example here shows you just the first three parameters being filled in. So the main string, the thing you're looking for, and the thing you want to replace it with. But there are three extra optional parameters. The first optional parameter is the character number you want to begin replacing from. By default, it starts at the first character in the string. So if I type in the number 1, then it will again begin at the first character. If I then type in another comma, the next optional parameter says how many replacements you'd like to make. By default, the replace function replaces every instance of the character you're looking for. So you saw that all the lowercase letter A's got replaced. If we only wanted to replace the first one, we could type in the number 1, for example. The default value of this is -1 or -1, and that means to replace every single instance. The final parameter then is the one that lets us control whether things are case sensitive or not. So by default, things are case sensitive, and the way that's set is by using a constant called VB binary compare. So binary compare means that uppercase letters and lowercase letters are treated differently. Now I don't care about comparing uppercase letters and lowercase letters differently. I just want to know if it's a letter A of any form, I want it to be replaced. So in order to make that work, we can use the constant VB text compare. And we just have a look at the final result of that. So we're replacing stuff in the role column. We're looking for a letter A. We're going to replace letter A's with an empty string. We're starting at the first character. We're going to replace every instance of the letter A, and we don't care whether it's an uppercase or a lowercase a. So having done that, if I zoom back out again and hit OK a couple of times, when I run the report again, we'll see this time even the leading capital letter A has now disappeared. Now we can replicate that same expression in SQL as well, although it works a little differently in SQL as you might expect. But let's have a look. If I head back to the design view, I'll right click the movie roles dataset and choose dataset properties. And then I'll add a new column above my from clause in the select list, starting with a comma, and then the name of the function is the same, it's still replace. And the first three parameters are the same as well. If I open up some round brackets, I'm going to copy and paste the reference to the role column first, followed by a comma, and then the text in the role column that I want to replace, which again in this case is going to be a single letter A, in single quotes this time of course, rather than double quotes as in Visual Basic. and then another comma, and the string I want to replace the A's with. So again, in this case, it's going to be an empty string or two single quotes written together. I can then close the round brackets and assign an alias to it. I'll call it replace A2. And then a quick zoom so you can see the final result there. And then once I've done that, I'm going to click OK, and I'll replace the replace A column with replace A2. And if I run the report at that stage, we'll see this time, without needing to specify, the replace function in SQL has replaced all instances of letter A's, uppercase and lowercase. Now that's not actually to do with the default behavior of the replace function in SQL necessarily. This is to do with the default or the collation that's been applied to either the column or the table or the database. Collation is a property which determines all sorts of things about text in SQL Server. Things like the set of characters you're using, sort of are they English or Roman characters or Cyrillic characters or Greek characters, for example. Case sensitivity, of course, accent sensitivity, and there are even settings to distinguish between different kana character sets in Japanese, hiragana and katakana. So back in the design view, or in fact rather than the design view, if you're interested in how collation works and you've got a lot of spare time on your hands, there's a great page on the Microsoft Docs website about collation in SQL. So what we can do, the important thing for us, of course, is that we can change the collation to make it case sensitive or case insensitive. And the specific bit that we're interested in is the ability to change this single property. Currently, the collation settings of the database I'm using are case insensitive. I want to change it so that it's case sensitive. Now we have to do at least one other property at the same time. We have to specify not just case sensitivity, but also accent sensitivity. So whether it distinguishes between, for example, letter E's with and without an accent. Let's have a quick look. As well as having to specify the case sensitivity and accent sensitivity as a minimum, we also need to specify what language we're using. And again, scrolling further down the list, there are lots and lots and lots of different languages you can use. So if you wanted to see the full range of options available, then you can see them in the table a little further down the page. We're going to go with one similar to this. We're going to use the Latin 1 character set, general, case sensitive, accent sensitive. So to show how that applies in Report Builder, I'm going to head back to my dataset properties, and I'm going to click just after the reference to the role column. So we're modifying the collation of this specific column rather than the result of the calculation. So I'll type in a space just after that, and then type in the word collate, and then the name of the collation I want to use. So I'm going to use Latin 1 underscore general underscore CS for case sensitive, and the accent sensitivity doesn't really matter here, we're not dealing with accented characters, but I'll say AS for this example. So there you go, that's what the final collate property should look like. Having done that, if I were to click OK and then run the report again, this time we should see that the capital letter A has reappeared, and it's only the lowercase a's that have now been replaced. So that was all just to give you a bit of background as to how the replace function works in general. Of course, what we're aiming to do here is replace the quote characters with an empty string. So let's head back to the design view, and I'll start by adding a new calculated field to the movie roles dataset. And then I'll call this column replace quote. And then I'll click the FX button to launch the expression builder. Head to the common functions category and text, and then double click the replace function. I can then go back to my fields list and refer to my role field, and then type in a comma after that, and I want to make sure that I'm looking for a double quote character. Now this is where things get a little bit fiddly with Visual Basic. Obviously we're using double quotes to contain the strings we're looking for. So again, going back to the previous example, we typed in a single letter A in some double quotes. If I wanted to look for a double quote character, I can't sadly just get away with typing in a single double quote in that string. If I do so, and then type in a comma, and then type in a pair of double quotes together, and then close the round brackets, it looks as though on the surface, it does look as though I'm looking for a double quote character and replacing the double quote characters with an empty string. The problem in Visual Basic is that these characters, the double quote characters, always go in pairs. So the way Visual Basic reads this is that the first two double quote characters are treated as a pair together, then the second two are treated as another pair, and this last one is just treated by itself as a random extra rogue character. Just to prove that this doesn't actually work, if I click OK and then click OK again, and then I try to drop this replace quote field in my table, I'll just get rid of the replace A2 column as well, just so we can see this a little more clearly. You'll see if I run the report, it falls over flat on its face. And the details tell us not much of use, it just says that there's a problem with the replace quote expression. It does hint that there's some kind of problem with the double quote character there though. The solution to this sort of problem, well, there are two solutions actually. Back in the design view, a simple way to solve this problem, if I right click the replace quote function or field and choose field properties, click the FX button, and then if I just add an extra double quote, so if I'm looking for a single double quote character, I actually need to double them up inside the double quotes. It looks a little bit strange, 4 double quotes together, but this is the standard approach. Whenever you're entering the text delimiter character inside a set of text delimiters, the solution is to double them up. If I then click OK and OK again, and just to prove that this does indeed work, we can see now that I've got all the quotes finally replaced. That works. It's not the most elegant solution necessarily. It's not obvious to somebody looking at that expression what on earth's going on there. And in fact, I'm not sure the next example will make it any more obvious, but you might prefer it yourself. What we can do here is we can look for the character code for a double quote character. We used this technique in the previous video actually to look for the character code of a tab character or a new line character. There's a great article on the Wikipedia webpage about the ASCII character codes. Have a quick look again if you've got lots of spare time on your hands. If I look at the printable characters list, then there's a decimal numeric code for each character you can print. So the double quote character is specified as character code number 34. So an alternative way to solve this, if I switch back to Report Builder, right click the replace quote function or field and choose field properties, click the FX button. Rather than typing in a big long chunk of double quote characters, I can replace those with a reference to the CHR function. So in the text category, there's a function called CHR, which allows you to enter a character code and have it return that character. So if I typed in CHR and then went for the number 34 and then closed the round brackets, that would look for a double quote character. So if I zoom back out and then click OK a couple of times, just to prove that it still works, if I run the report again, we've got the exact same end results. Now this is actually a little easier to handle in the SQL version of that expression. Because the text delimiter in SQL is a single quote, we don't have to worry about the same thing. Just to show you how that works, back in the design view, I can right click the movie roles dataset and choose dataset properties. And I'll create another new column by adding a new line above the from clause, type in a comma, and then the replace function again. And then I'll copy and paste the role column name. I should have just copied the first part of the expression from the previous line really, but anyway, there we go. So I'm replacing in the role column, I want to replace a double quote character. I can type in a single quote, followed by a single double quote, followed by another single quote. So apostrophe, double quote, apostrophe, followed with a comma and then 2 apostrophes together as replace quote 2. So just a quick zoom, it's not easy to see this really, but a single quote and then a double quote and then a single quote. So having done that, if I click OK, and then I'm going to again replace the replace quote column with the replace quote 2 column, give that one a quick run so you can see that the end result is still the same. So that's a little bit nicer to do actually in SQL because we don't have to worry about doubling up the double quotes. But what if we wanted to do something like this? What if we wanted to replace the single quote character? So I don't think there are any single quotes in any of the character names, or non-obvious ones at the top of the list at least. But in the film titles, I've got a single quote character there in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. So again, I've got the same problem. If I want to replace the character which is used to delimit strings, I've got a couple there, its and dead man's, then I've got the same issue in SQL. And I can solve it in the same two ways. If I go back to the design view, I'm going to add a new I'll go to dataset properties and add a new calculated column to the dataset. I'll add a new column, a comma, replace, and then this time I'll replace information in the film title column. If I type in a comma, I can do this in two ways. I can type in 4 single quotes together and replace those with an empty string, so 2 single quotes together, and as replace title quote. And again, just to show you what that looks like, there we go. So 4 single quotes together. Just to prove that that one works, if I click OK, and then I'll drag that field to the end of my table, and then just change the column width a bit so we can read it a little more clearly. We should now see Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest has no apostrophe, and It's a Mad 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 World has no apostrophe in the it's either. The equivalent solution using the character code, I need to find the character code for a single quote character. So let's go back to the printable characters table, find the apostrophe, which is code number 39. There's an equivalent function in SQL for calculating characters based on a character code. It's got a slightly different name, but if I go back to the dataset properties dialog box, and then I can replace those 4 single quotes with a reference to the char function, C-H-A-R, or char I suppose, it's character, and then in some round brackets I can enter the character code 39. And if I zoom in there just so you can see that hopefully a little more clearly. Okay, so having done that, a quick click of the OK button, and then we can run that report, and we'll see the same replacement has been made. The single quotes, the apostrophes, have been removed from the film titles and replaced with an empty string. Now, the almost final step in this report is to change the sort order so that it sorts on the replaced version of the quote characters. So let's head back to the design view, and I'm going to get rid of the replaced title column. So I'm going to highlight and then delete that column. Then just bring my page width back a little bit as well. I'll try to do that. There we go. And then I'll go back to the TableX properties dialog box and head back to the sorting page and choose to sort by not trimmed roll, but by replaced quote. So I'll click on the drop down list and choose replace quote. Now you may already spot a problem that's going to occur with this, but if I click OK and then run the report, we end up with those first 4 rows back up at the top again, the ones with a leading space in front of their character names. So we've done trimming and we've done replacing, but in 2 separate columns. If we want the final output to be as clean as possible, we need to combine the 2. So what I'm going to do is head back to the design view, and I'm going to right click on the replace quote column and choose field properties. Then I will click on the FX button next to that. And then what I'm going to do is, well, I can do a couple of things. I can wrap this entire thing in a trim function, or I can refer to, rather than the roll column, I can refer to the trimmed roll column. I'm going to nest this inside a trim function. So I'm going to say trim, open some round brackets, and then close the round brackets at the end. Click OK and OK again. And if I just get rid of the replace quote column as well, just to make things even tidier, hopefully. Back to running the report. I finally have all of my characters sorted alphabetically by character name. I've gotten rid of the leading spaces, and I haven't gotten rid of the double quotes around character names, so they're still displayed, but I am sorting by the column which has replaced all the double quote characters. So there we go, a few basic techniques you might find useful for cleaning up dirty text that's imported from various different sources, trimming and replacing two fairly commonly used techniques. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.